Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston and we're back again, recording on a Monday afternoon, just a few hours before United play the first pre-season friendly of the summer. I'm joined by Samuel Luckhurst as usual. And Samuel, I expected to come into this podcast with a big smile on my face, watching England win their first trophy for 58 years, but it wasn't to be. My mood is a little bit somber. Can you cheer us up?
Well, if you need cheering up, United's season is starting today. I'm not too sure if that's cheerful for us. I mean, I feel sorry for the people in Norway, the squad they've sent out there. How this is being couched as a first team friendly, I'm not too sure. It is teeming with academy players and very few first team players, unfortunately. So I think. I mean, if this can cheer you up, I'd say this is Ty's comeuppance for missing Brentford away on a Saturday night, Chelsea away on a Thursday night, Crystal Palace away on a Monday night, Brighton away on a sunny Sunday. All those ones where he was, had a cushy weekend and avoided all those miles and all the, I suppose, the deep vein thrombosis, the risk of that, how he avoided that, and now he's going to Trondheim to watch this game. That really, I don't think the excitement levels they can't be too great among United fans, even those who tune in today.
I was telling the Tony Adams story in the pub actually yesterday before going to the match. Obviously, me and Rich driving back from Brighton, which was a long journey, and pulling over in the service station. A car in front of us making an abrupt halt. And me and Rich like, who is this person? Stepped out of the car and it was Tony Adams in a bright coloured suit, so that was interesting. Fair enough, fair enough. Anyways, I mean, we discussed on Friday Joshua Zirkzee, and we used the words inching closer and all the cliches and whatever we use with transfers. But it's now been made official, Samuel, as expected. That was announced on Sunday afternoon, just a few hours before the Euro 2024 final. We're probably in danger of repeating ourselves again because there's not a huge amount to say now this deal has been confirmed officially.
No, it's just going to be a case of wait until he pulls the shirt on and crosses the white line and makes his debut, and we see how he gets on. There's a reasonable chance that could be the Community Shield. I think it's almost he almost certainly will not play any part in on the pre-season tour just because of how deep the Netherlands went into the Euros. The 3 weeks that players are. I mean, it's almost like a contractual obligation that they have to have 3 weeks off after a tournament. Now, some will want to come back sooner rather than take the full 3 weeks off. It does change. I mean, you see with the preseason squad that have gone out to Norway, I don't think anybody really expected Andre Onana to not go out there. Yet he's not there. Ahmad's not there. Harry Maguire, Victor Lindelof, they're not there. It's a peculiar, the decision making process. It's due to their own personal programs, and everyone is built differently, and they're going to have to treat certain players differently from others. I mean, Luke Shaw. I suspect a lot of United fans, and I wouldn't blame them if they were thinking, "Well, why should he have 3 weeks off when he's had all this time off playing without playing for United?" But he's been in a tournament environment for upwards of a month, including the pre-camp with England when they were playing those friendlies. He was in the camp, he was getting treatment, he was continuing his rehabilitation. So it's not exactly been a holiday, but I get the point that it's somewhat reasonable to expect that he should maybe not stay away for 3 weeks, that he should get back to Carrington a little bit earlier than some teammates who've had a very taxing 12 months with pre-season club commitments, international commitments, a European Championship or a Copa America at the end of it. In the case of Anana, obviously the AFCON in the middle of it. But I suppose with Zirkzee, okay, like we'd imagine that he will be at Carrington in 3 weeks' time, which will be essentially the end of United's pre-season tour, the day they get back from South Carolina. Of course, they're not going to go straight from the airport into training, but I think it's reasonable to expect that the England players, the Portugal players, Pellistri, Martinez, Garnacho, and now Zirkzee, it's probably reasonable to expect that those players would come back in 3 weeks' time, and then they can start having their training. And then it's really a case of getting their conditioning ready so that they're in with a shout of starting against Fulham, because that is a fine balancing act in terms of having senior players on tour who will be in a very good condition come that game. And then Ten Hag will naturally feel duty bound to start with them because he's had the FaceTime with them. They've had the minutes in pre-season. They've had the training. They've had the pre-season. But also you do want as strong a team out to put out as possible in your opening game against a team that beat United at Old Trafford last season and no mugs whatsoever. But Højlund's got a little head start over Zirkzee. So come that game, I don't think anybody's expecting Joshua Zirkzee to start the season for United, provided that Højlund is fit, of course. But I suppose there's an outside chance that he gets some playing time in the Community Shield. But where it's a Saturday game, it's slightly earlier in the week when it's normally been on a Sunday. I can't quite remember the last time the Community or the Charity Shield was held on the Saturday. It's always seemed to have been a Sunday, but I can't remember the reasoning behind or the rationale behind the switch to Saturday, August the 10th this year. So it's going to be a while yet before we see him, and we didn't really see much of him at the Euros either. Those two cameos where he had about 6 minutes or however many minutes it was of playing time, it wasn't a lot at all. So I mean, you can't judge a player on the basis of tournament performances anyway. In his case, there was nothing really to judge at all because he probably struggled to kick the ball across those two games.
He scored 12 goals for Bologna last season. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched him week in, week out in Serie A because I'm not a football hipster following that league. We're watching the football over here. But look, we've all saw the clip, so it'll be interesting to see how he actually hits the ground running. Hopefully he can. If he can score 12 goals again, I think that'll be a very good season, considering he's probably coming to jeopardise to Højlund. So we'll see how that one goes. Exciting anyways to get the first one over the line, first transfer, and a few more to come. Just going back to the injuries and talking about players' fitness, did you see Surgeon Ratcliffe's message to Luke Shaw?
I did, yes. Yes, I did. Yeah, I was given. I mean, you'll be able to join the dots anyway, but I was given an advance notice of that, so it was very, very amusing. Apparently, there's a slight chance he might be at this game in Norway today because he filmed that from North Iceland and he's on his yacht as well. So it's obviously not far to go for him to get around to Norway. But I think he certainly echoed a lot of all United supporters and imploring Shaw not to pull his hamstring again. And he did get through a very creditable 90 minutes against, certainly for me, as great as Rodri is, I'd have given player of the tournament to Lamine Yamal for the sheer impact of him, goal or assist in all those knockout games, pretty extraordinary for a 16 turning 17-year-old.
Shaw was excellent in that first half. He had a very, very good start of the game, I thought. And it was unfortunate for England that he wasn't available sooner. I saw some people complaining about Ratcliffe's joke and just lighten up. It's not that serious. You can still joke about injuries and stuff like that.
As we've said before, fans are way more negative about United than journalists. Yeah,
there's always people complaining on social media. Yeah, there's always people complaining on social media. Jadon Sancho then, Samuel, he's returned to training. I think that's fair to say that was a bit of a surprise when that news dropped. I was actually driving to Liverpool for my best friend's stag do this weekend. So it's been an interesting weekend for me the last 2 days. You can imagine what was going on over the last Saturday and Sunday afternoon. We didn't expect it. He's resolved the rift for Erik ten Hag. They've had a positive meeting. And it's going to be interesting to see, again, how that one develops going forward because our understanding was there was a sale going to happen this summer. United intended to sell Sancho. I think we said 30 million would be a good fee for him. Is there a way back, especially now after he's returned to training? Do you think he could actually win a starting role again?
I don't think he'll win his starting role again. There's clearly a way back because he's back in the building and he's training with teammates. He's training under Ten Hag again. It raises a hell of a lot of questions, and most of them have been unanswered. I mean, United were quite opaque about the situation. Do you want to keep him now? Do you want to sell him still? They can't say on that. I found it quite amusing as well that on the day that Sancho was back in at Carrington, which was actually Thursday, the announcement that he had returned was on the Friday. But on that Thursday, Dortmund assigned his number 10, the number 10 that he wore last season, to Julian Brandt. And of course, again, we talk about that PSG first leg, that the victory lap that Dortmund were doing about Sancho's performance, because he did play very well in that first leg of the semi-finals, and they had a tweet saying, "You owe us an apology. We were always familiar with his game." And you think, okay, but you've decided not to buy him. You're playing the pleading poverty card that you can't afford his wages. He called Dortmund home as well, lest we forget. But clearly, the home comforts aren't snug enough for someone to drop their wage demands and move back to Dortmund. He's quite happy to take the money still at Man United, and he's back in training. He's actually at least spoken to Ten Hag. They've not been able to clarify whether he apologised to Ten Hag. Unfortunately for Ten Hag, this, unless he clarifies it, and there are a couple of journalists out in Norway, and if they get FaceTime with him, I'm sure they'll try and get additional clarity on it. But there is a danger that the manager's authority is eroding again. When a player who was quite rightly banished last year for accusing the manager of lying is ushered back into the fold under a new hierarchy, a new structure. And let's face it, although Sancho's resale value went up by virtue of Dortmund getting to the Champions League final, it was still very difficult, and it is still very difficult to identify a market for him, because not only has he he didn't exactly set the world alight at Dortmund, but also he's been at Manchester United for 3 years, and those 3 years have not been good for him. There's been a lot more bad during that time than good for him. They paid £72.9 million for him under the profitability and sustainability rules, and that amortization, the cost of a player spread over the length of a contract. United needed to get something like, or need to get, if they could still get it, they need to get about £30 million or thereabouts, so that it doesn't have an adverse effect on the balance sheet. You'd think that a club out there would take a punt on Sancho for £30 million, but the fact that United have brought him back into the fold, and United were talking about £40 million, which I thought was way, way, way too much. I was struggling to think of any club that would think, yeah, let's part with £40 million for Jadon Sancho, who hasn't played for England in nearly 3 years, who was bombed out of the United squad last season, whose mentality is questionable to say the least, and who had to go back to Dortmund with his tail between his legs, and again, didn't exactly set the world alight there. How's he worth £40 million? So there has been a climb down of some sorts, whether it's by United or whether it's by Ten Hag. But Ten Hag, the way he's dealt with players and disciplined them has been nigh on faultless at United. And he did restore authority to the manager's role when he took over a couple of years ago. But with Sancho coming back in, it as I said, it raises a lot of questions, and I find it unfair that it's going to be Ten Hag who has to answer them. And that's a parallel with last season. He was put in an invidious position a number of times over a number of different topics, and that comes with the territory. A manager is duty bound to answer questions on key matters, and especially if the Man United manager, there's always a hell of a lot to go at. And sooner or later, Ten Hag will be asked about Jadon Sancho, and he will have to say something that's going to be. He will say something that will be quite revelatory, if not earth-shattering. But this is a player who it's still unclear whether he apologised for accusing the manager of lying. And I just think that if a lot of comparisons between United now and Ferguson's United are moot, things are different, times have changed, etc. But there are some principles you need to abide by, and there's no way a player would have survived calling out Ferguson as publicly as Sancho did, accusing him of lying. And we all know, and everyone it's almost like an unwritten rule in football that you should back the manager over the player. And United have done that with Ten Hag, and they backed him over Ronaldo, rightly so. They backed him over Marcus Rashford a couple of times last season. They backed him to release David De Gea, and they backed him over Sancho. I don't know what Jadon Sancho has done in his career to earn a little bit more slack over other players in that squad who have crossed or transgressed during Ten Hag's time, and it does risk setting the wrong example. by the time that Fulham game comes along, maybe Sancho has been sold, and United have decided to wash their hands of him or cut their losses, and they've managed to get a fee that pleases all parties, and the balance sheet looks okay. But this guy should. I've said it so many times. He shouldn't play for United again. He accused the manager of lying. He didn't apologise. There's no indication that he's apologised since. And if he was to apologise, it would be extremely belated, and you'd have to question the contrition of it. There wasn't a single time last season watching United where anyone thought, crikey, they're really missing Jadon Sancho today. He has not got the mentality to succeed at Man United. That's been apparent over his 3 years at the club. And there's a reason why he opted for the change of scenery at Dortmund, because he did well there before. The pressure there is nowhere near as intense as United. And that's the kind of level he needs to go to and operate in. But he's still got 2 years left on his United contract. Clearly, United are having an issue or issues in terms of shifting him. But I think the possibility of countenancing him in the squad next season and retaining him, I don't think that's a good look for a manager who the club decided to keep after a 17-day end of season review, whose contract was merely triggered by a 1 year, which was an existing option they already had. And with some very senior coaches coming into his backroom staff that has been gutted. Three coaches have gone. Two of them came in with Ten Hag 2 years ago. So it raises a lot of questions, as I said, and Ten Hag will have to answer them sooner or later. And I do have sympathy with him over that, because clarity was absolutely essential on Sancho, and we've not had enough of it, other than Jadon reflected on past issues. I mean, they are quite substantial past issues, but the key questions are: did he apologise? Is he going to be kept? Is he going to be sold? And eventually, those questions will be answered, but it still may be some time yet.
I said last summer that this season should probably have been his last anyways, and obviously that was before that outburst in September. Look at how he's performed. Look at his stats: 12 goals, 6 assists in over 80 appearances. He's just not been good enough. Such a disappointment. You could add him to the catalogue of transfer mistakes and disappointments and flops, again, using that word. I've been very, very underwhelmed and disappointed personally, because I was so excited to see him play for United after watching him quite a bit for Dortmund, but we've discussed it at length really, why it's not worked out, the style of play, his qualities. I don't think necessarily lend themselves to the Premier League. He doesn't really beat a fullback, he doesn't take them on, he doesn't look capable of doing that. And yet, when you watch him in that Champions League, it was that one game, wasn't it, against PSG in the first leg, he looked like a different player. He looked like he was the old Jadon Sancho. But I don't think you're going to see that player week in, week out in the Premier League. And I think even since returning to training, I think he's got to be sold this summer. Close the book and move on. That would be my advice. We'll leave it there for part one, and we'll be back in a moment for part two. Welcome back to part two of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, I think on Friday's podcast, or the one before that time, we were talking about Willy Cambuala and discussing a potential role from next season. I mean, that looked very quickly, didn't it? Because he's packed his bags, he's off to Spain, bit of a sunnier climate, and he's going to Villarreal, which is a good move, I'd say, for him. You kind of discussed the pedestrian, maybe pedestrian's a bit harsh, but how the Liga is less competitive than the Premier League. So Cambuala's still only 19. He'll have time to develop in Spain and progress a bit more, but he will leave United. And we looked a bit after saying, yeah, he'd have a role next season. It'd be worth having around the place.
Yeah, in the words of Ron Burgundy, that escalated quickly. And I completely understand why United have sold him. They're making a profit on a defender who was injury prone throughout his 4 years at the club. He's only 19. He's only played 10 times for the first team, 3 of them as a starter. Those starting performances were quite mixed. United lost 1, they drew the other 2. He got a real going over from Dominic Solanke. I thought he was pretty decent against West Ham, and he was good against Liverpool. He does have raw attributes that suggest that he could be a good centre-back, but I don't think he was ever going to be a starting centre-back at United. I think he actually became something of a success story just to have overcome the injury issues that he had in his first 3 years or so at the club, and to get into the squad and to make his debut. And that was by virtue, of course, of the the depleted state of the defence last season. Ten Hag told a confidant, you know, if towards the end of last season, when they were discussing various matters and the state of the defence, he said, if you told me that during pre-season that Willy Kambwala would play for me, I'd have called you crazy. So clearly, despite giving him playing time, and he had to give him playing time because of the absence of other centre backs, Ten Hag never really considered him as a player to integrate into the first team through reward. It's not like he looked upon him in the same way he looked at Kobbie Mainoo, or looking a bit more presently, you're looking at Harry Amas and maybe Toby Collier, just because of the Ten Hag seems to have taken a shine to him. But Kambwala had those opportunities, and he's been part of an FA Youth Cup winning squad, although I'm not too sure he even played that season because of injury. He certainly wasn't in the squad for the final, and he was in the FA Cup final squad when United beat City, because Casemiro cried off at the last minute after he was dropped for Sofian Amrabat. So he's got some fabulous memories from 4 years, less than 4 years technically in Manchester, and he's played for Man United. He's won the FA Cup. That's pretty great going for a lad who it looked like his race was run, and he might have ended up in the lower league somewhere. So to move to a team that won the Europa League a few years ago, that have got reasonable pedigree in Europe. I mean, this century alone, I think Villarreal have reached 2 Champions League semi-finals, which is nearly as many semi-finals as United have reached this century. So it's not bad at all for him to get that move. And looking at the fee that United got, they had to accept that. And Kambwala, from what I was told, he had a meeting with Ten Hag, and Ten Hag laid out to him, look, you'll be low down the pecking order. So the chances are he'll have more opportunities in Villarreal. United have got a good fee for him. You can't complain with that whatsoever. There's no real ruthlessness about it, but clearly they have got to be a lot more proactive with sales, and this is a good example of it. I think we touched upon it when we were doing the keep or sells a couple of months ago, whenever that may have been, that there were certain players you can be quite fluid with them. It doesn't matter either way whether they stay or whether they go. And Kambwala probably would have fallen into that category. I mean, when he got back last week, it seemed like he'd be given a squad number upgrade, and then all of a sudden United get this offer from Villarreal, and why wouldn't they say it would have been daft of them to have rejected it? They had to say yes to that offer, and maybe it won't rise to 11.5 million euros if he doesn't have as productive a time at Villarreal as everyone would hope. But it's still a pretty good upfront fee for someone who has not played a lot of football for United, and has been reduced to mainly cameos. And in some of those cameos, as I touched upon it last week, the Chelsea game and the City game, when he came on, United were all at sea, and they did go to pot, and they ended up losing those games. So he is I think he's got good raw attributes, and it wouldn't surprise me if he thrives in Spain as well. And he'll have Eric Bailly for company as well. So if at least United have identified one club who it seems like are happy to take defenders of various degrees of competency there.
Inter Milan and Villarreal are bonding over taking United's rejects. It's probably harsh to describe Kambwala as a reject. I mean, he only had 1 year left on his contract, and he did obviously reject a new deal. So at that point, you have to be proactive in the market and arrange a sale. And on that subject, Victor Lindelof has entered the final of his deal, along with a few other players like Wan-Bissaka, Hannibal. We've discussed that United should move them on this summer. But I think you did the story, was it today, Samuel, or yesterday? Or, United are stepping up their efforts to dispose of Lindelof after 7 years. He's been a great survivor. He just keeps on surviving every summer, but I think it's finally going to come to end, and he's going to be shipped out this year.
I would be surprised if they didn't get rid of him. There should be a market for a player of that profile. I think he turns 30 this week, but I think that, as we've discussed before, the days where a footballer would turn 30 and you think, don't touch them with a barge pole, they're long gone. The longevity of footballers is far greater now than it used to be, with the sports science and just their conditioning and the way they look after each other. The way they look after themselves. And with Lindelof, he's not going to get a new contract. If he was given a new contract, you might as well reinstate Ed Woodward to the United board. They're going to sign 2 or 3 centre backs. Why wouldn't you sell someone who's out of contract next year? They've got to sell him, and they
I just
are
had a feeling
stepping
he
up
was
their
going to stay.
efforts.
Do you remember when we were talking about this? I think pulling the car going down to Bournemouth, and because I've made the point, he's the great survivor. No matter what, each summer he just seems to be kept for no particular reason. I mean, he has got merit as a squad player, but I had a feeling he'd be kept this summer. But I think it is obviously the right thing to do to move him on.
Yeah, and he has had very good resilience in the sense that I think every year he's been at United, or every summer, most of them anyway, they've signed a centre back. They signed Varane in 21, Martinez in 22. Harry Maguire came in 2019. Certainly in 2018, they were. Mourinho was very uh, very open about his desire for a centre back as well. So, more often than not, while he's been there, there's been added competition. And even when they wouldn't sign a centre back, I think in 2020, I think throughout that season, a lot of people, myself included, were wondering, well, why is Bailly not playing more often? Because Lindelof didn't have a particularly good season, and Bailly seemed like a far more logical partner for Harry Maguire than Lindelof. And in the end, Lindelof kept on playing, and he has got very good characteristics in that he's pretty steady on the ball. He's quite a good reader of the game. He has grown into more of a leadership figure at the club, and he's played under 4 or 5 different managers, and the majority of them have taken a shine to him. I mean, last season, it was the fewest games he's played, but he did have a couple of lengthy injury layoffs, and he was playing regularly until he got injured on those 2 occasions, I think. And in the case of Ten Hag, I think he had his longest starting run in Ten Hag's first season towards the end of it, and I'd say that was probably his best spell of form for United as well. So that's testament to a good character in the squad who can adapt to new coaching methods, new coaches, new demands, and still do quite well. But I don't think anybody has ever really seen him, apart from maybe his first summer there. I don't think anybody's seen him as a certain starter for United. And when he did come in, the first Premier League game, he wasn't even in the matchday squad because he wasn't deemed ready by Mourinho. And Mourinho was certainly not wholly convinced by going for Lindelof. It's still Mourinho who's the manager who signed him, and it's still on Mourinho to an extent that Lindelof came in rather than someone else. But other than that period, he's been going into seasons. You've been wondering, apart from maybe 1 or 2, you've been wondering, well, should he be starting the season? And I think even that 2020-21 season, I think he was dropped for the Tottenham game because there was a bit of a clamour for Bailly to come in. Bailly did come in, and Bailly being Bailly, I think it was Rich who had a nice quote about him. I can't remember what it was specifically, but with Bailly coming in, you knew at some point, sooner or later, something bad would happen, and it would be pretty catastrophic. And Bailly came in against Tottenham, and Tottenham scored 6 goals. So sometimes it's better the devil you know, and Lindelof did survive for as long as he did because of that reason, or reasons similar to that. He started in the FA Cup final in 2023, and rightly so because of his form at that point. But things can change quickly. I mean, at that stage, you'd have been looking at him and thinking, well, he's definitely staying, and Harry Maguire's probably going, and that was almost the case last year. Now Maguire is in a much more, not much more, but certainly a more secure position than Lindelof is. Maguire's contract technically expires next year as well, but that +1 will be triggered on it if he is still at United. You'd think in January or just before January, because he offers resale value. But I think they are 2 defenders who, if they don't both go this year, then I think one will go this year and then one will go next year, because it's the way United are going to operate now. They clearly have no problem in overhauling certain departments, and if Varane, Lindelof, and Cambuala go, that's a it's not a drastic overhaul, but it's something of an overhaul. I mean, Varane started in the FA Cup final. Campoala was involved towards the end of last season. Lindelof has been at the club for 7 years, and I don't think anybody would complain if, come the end of the transfer window, all three of them have departed. But Lindelof, he is a player that has resale value, and it's down to him. It's down to his agent. It's down to Dan Ashworth and Jason Wilcox to identify a suitable club who are actually going to cough up reasonable money for players into the last year of his contract.
Just looking at his profile there for the last few months of Eric Ten Hag's first season. I mean, he started the last 9 Premier League games that year. Obviously, Ten Hag's first season, as I just said, and at the FA Cup final. And I think I seem to remember being very impressed with him against Brighton in the semi-finals. But he did have a good few months. He ended that season with a flourish. But you're right, things changed really quickly, and Maguire's surpassed him now, hasn't he, in the pecking order. Moving on then, United are in action, as we've said throughout this podcast, at 5 p.m. in Norway against Rosenborg. It's a very youthful squad, isn't it, Samuel? As you said in the first part, I think Anana's obviously not there, but it's Wan-Bissaka, Mount, Rashford, Casemiro. Have I missed anyone? Senior players who are going.
You said Rashford,
Hannibal.
didn't you?
Yeah, you could throw Hannibal in there as well, I guess.
I think by the time people listen to this, the game will have been played. Won't it? Ty's due to offer his contribution from sun. It looks very sunny in Trondheim, so that's something that he's got in his favour.
We might add a little snippet from Ty. We'll see how it goes. He might have some analysis from the game and a voice note to add to the podcast. But you're about to go to the United States, Samuel, so that's a bit more exciting, isn't it, than the opening 2 friendlies, which, like last season, were very youthful squads.
Well, you're in Edinburgh, aren't you, on Saturday? So we'll probably do one more of these before I get up early next Monday morning, and then I might be up even earlier, jet lagged, on the Tuesday morning to do a podcast, hopefully from Los Angeles. But in terms of the squad they've sent to Norway, as I said, I feel sorry for the Norwegians, because although they'd have known there wouldn't be any Euros players or any Copa America players, they could at least have expected a pretty strong team. United did have the amount of pretty much the number of players to start that game, of senior players: Maguire, Lindelof, Wan-Bissaka, Onana, Casemiro, Mount, Rashford, Anthony, Ahmad, those players, and only half of them, it feels like, have travelled out there. So that is disappointing for the supporters who are paying to really just watch a friendly that is barely a first team friendly. I think there are only 2 players in that squad out in Trondheim who are certain to be in the squad next season, which are Johnny Evans and Mason Mount. You can't say that Casemiro will definitely be at United next season. You can't say the same of Marcus Rashford either. So it does feel a bit of a cheat, really, to couch this as a first team friendly. It's about as much of a first team friendly as that academy friendly against Wrexham in San Diego last year. So maybe Ten Hag will give his rationale for going into greater depth as to why he's left some senior figures behind in Carrington. I mean, Rene Hake and Ruud van Nistelrooy have accompanied him on this trip. So
you love talking about the assistant managers now, don't you?
Well, who's doing the coaching back at Carrington? Maybe it's Steve McLaren on his stretcher or on crutches, given that he's recently had a foot operation, the first injury, the first casualty of United's new season. But I think both of us are not too sorry that we've not gone to Norway, but at least Ty has got some sunny weather, and he's going to a different part of the world that he's probably never ever considered on going to or venturing to.
When were you last in Scandinavia? Which game was it for?
Copenhagen, in that rip-roaring Champions League group stage game in November. Copenhagen was lovely. That was certainly my favourite of the 3 European away days that we had last season. It was slightly drizzly, but it's a really picturesque city, terrific stadium, terrific transport getting to the stadium as well, and a terrific game, albeit one that didn't end in United's favour. There was certainly a lot to write home about from that evening.
And they were so in control, weren't they, after a very, very good start to the game, but they threw it away.
Yeah, they were very impressive at the start.
Yeah, we saw that a lot last season. We'll leave it there. It was just a shorter podcast today. We'll be back later in the week. Thanks, Samuel, for your time as usual.
Thank you, Stephen, as always.
And thanks to everyone else. If you are watching a game, hopefully it's a thriller. United Rosenborg with a youthful side doesn't exactly promise to be. We'll catch you later in the week. Bye bye.